time for Lefties Losing It. Let's start with a special message from Vice President and failed presidential candidate Kamala Harris. Is this message delivered to her voters or is it for herself?
I just have to remind you, don't you ever let anybody take your power from you. You have the same power that you did before November 5th. And you have the same purpose that you did. And you have the same ability to engage and inspire. So don't ever let anybody or any circumstance take your power from you.
Where's the joy? Yes, it does feel like she's repeating a mantra to herself in the mirror daily. Now to someone else who needs a good, hard look in the mirror, because everything Sharon Stone spews in this sad little diatribe actually applies to her and her ilk.
My country is in its adolescence. Adolescence is very arrogant. Adolescence thinks it knows everything. Adolescence is naive and ignorant and arrogant. And we are in our ignorant, arrogant adolescence. We haven't seen this before in our country. So Americans who don't travel, who 80% don't have a passport, who are uneducated, are in their extraordinary naivete.
Extraordinary, the deep delusion, the self-delighted arrogance and ignorance of a Hollywood elite who has zero understanding of her own country and countrymen, let alone the world. Even her little stat there about passports was wildly wrong, but the ill-informed, hate-filled rant did not end there.
Those good men must be very aware that a lot of your friends are not good men. And you can't continue to pretend that your friends are good men when they are not good men. And you must be very clear-minded and understand that your friends who are not good men are dangerous, violent men, and you have to keep them away from your daughters, your wives, and your girlfriends.
If only she had the courage to speak out about bad men when Harvey Weinstein was preying upon young women. But then Harvey is a Democrat. He hated Trump. He hates Trump. He even marched with the Pussy Hat Brigade. Can you believe that? Against Donald Trump. And he remained protected. And let's end this Sharon Stone interlude with this ridiculous remark where she compares the real fascism Italy experienced in the past with Trump's election victory.
You know, Italy has seen fascism. Italy has seen these things. You guys, you understand what happens.
Oh dear, someone should tell Sharon who the Italian Prime Minister is right now. It's the Italian Trump, Giorgia Meloni, a centre-right woman who the media decried as a fascist, a far-right extremist and a threat to the country. Sound familiar? She's now among, if not the most popular leader in Europe. Also in Italy is another lefty losing it, and he's a regular in this segment, Alec Baldwin, fresh from an awful Saturday Night Live performance, and he too was bashing his country and his countrymen.
It's a very difficult time in the United States. Americans are very uninformed about reality, what's really going on with climate change, Ukraine, Israel, you name it, all the biggest topics in the world.
Now to CNN, where Scott Jennings, as the token conservative, continues to embarrass the lefty losers.
I heard what you're saying about X. I saw a survey this week. It's now the most ideologically balanced user platform.
Scott, stop. It's too early. I just sat down. I've only been here for 2 minutes.
You cannot continue to say that.
You cannot say that. That's not the case. Who's the source of that?
What I find, we reported it on this network.
It's not accurate, and you know it.
Okay, I'll let you make your statement.
Yes, Scott, what's your source? What's your source? It's too early for facts. Let's have a look at what his source is, where Scott got those facts and figures from?
Look at this. The party ID among those who regularly use X/Twitter for news. Back in 2022, 65% of those who regularly use Twitter/X for news were Democrats. Just 31% were Republicans. Look at where we are today. Just a completely different picture. Now it's basically split between Democrats at 48%, Republicans at 47%. And what I should note, Mr. Berman, is this new overall makeup matches the overall electorate far better.
Democrats still outnumber Republicans on X, but it's some sort of far-right site. I mean, people who spew that nonsense obviously have zero experience on social media, or they're just dishonest. Take your pick. Now let's check in with a grown man who identifies as a baby wearing a diaper, and he has a disturbing update for us.
Yeah, at work, I'm about to drop off an order, and my diaper's getting kind of full right now, so I might need to change really soon, but it is very discreet. Check out my last video for the discreet outfits video, but my diaper is getting a little full right now.
Joining me now is Deputy Opinion Editor at Newsweek, Bhattacharya Ungasagon. Bhattacharya, let's hear from Emmy Award-winning former CBS investigative journalist Catherine Herridge, who left the network early this year and can now reveal how they refused to air the stories, the contents of that infamous Biden laptop until after the midterm elections.
I went to a lot of effort to get the cleanest copy of the laptop data, the same data that was provided to the FBI, because I didn't want to have any professional journalistic risk for CBS News. I wanted this thing to be totally locked down. When we did the story, we did it after the midterms. I argued against that because it was ready before the midterms. And my training is that you should always do the story when it's ready to go. You should not be dictated by the political cycle.
But Tia, the story was good to go. It was ready, but they didn't want to run it before the midterms.
It's an absolute scandal, Rita. What you have here is a news organization pretending to be objective and actually literally carrying water for one of the candidates and one of the parties and one of the sides in this two-party system here. And when you think about the fact that CBS ran one of the presidential or the vice presidential debate, right? Like, how can this be? How can we allow this to stand where the media has chosen a side when it is their job to help the American people choose what is best for them? And you just see this in time and time again. You know, CBS just got caught doing it. But if you think that the journalists at the New York Times and the Atlantic and the Washington Post and CNN and MSNBC are any different, they really aren't. 96% of journalists are Democrats, and it's a huge scandal.
It is, and it only gets worse. Here, Catherine explains CBS did not want to report on legitimate stories like the use of the N-word in these text messages.
Once we got the laptop story on the morning news, I felt that there was so much there that we could still do. For example, in the text messages, there's unfortunately the use of the N-word, the liberal use of the N-word. And I thought this was worthy of a story, but I was told that it was not something that interested CBS News. Then I asked for a forensic review of the laptop, and we found that there were more than half a dozen emails that were likely used by Joe Biden. I thought that was a story. But the answer that came back was, well, we need to know what the content is of the emails. But that was going to be a years-long process.
Extraordinary. Not just the president's involvement in these emails, but the fact that these text messages had the liberal use of the N-word, she said there. That they would ignore that when they've been so obsessed with race and any sort of racial slur or any suggestion of racism, and you've got the use of the N-word and you think, oh, no one's going to be interested in that.
I mean, Rita, can you even imagine if they found text messages from Eric Trump or Don Jr. that had the N-word in them. I mean, they would talk about nothing else for a month. I mean, you just know that this is true. And meanwhile, they smear Donald Trump and they smear the MAGA movement as racist when actually covering up actual racism on their own side. And it's so amazing because you know that they are out there scouring tapes for some indication that Donald Trump is racist, a man who obviously does not have a racist bone in his body because they found nothing, Rita, in all of this time, while actively suppressing evidence that Joe Biden's own son uses the N-word. I mean, it's really so revealing, and I'm so glad that this reporting is out there, and I'm so glad that you are calling attention to it.
Well, is it any wonder that trust in the media is at historic lows in the US? And you can see why people are increasingly turning to the likes of Joe Rogan. The Democrats are very eager to create their own Joe Rogan, but as he explains here, they had him. He was a Democrat. Listen to this discussion between Joe Rogan and Mark Andreessen.
You pay people, it's not going to have the same impact. Yeah. You know, I think these Call Her Daddy shows and all these different shows that she went on, I mean, I'm sure they had an impact. Yeah. But I think that in the future, I'm sure they're scrambling to try to create their own version of this show. Right. This is one thing that keeps coming up, like we need our own Joe Rogan. Right. But they had me.
Well, number one, they had you. Number one, they had you. They had you and they drove you away. Is that number one? But they also have, you know, ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN.
Right, but that doesn't work anymore.
They had him. He was a Democrat, like so many others now who are standing with Donald Trump, including Elon Musk and RFK Jr., Tulsi Gabbard. Joe Rogan donated to Bernie Sanders. It was a Bernie bro, wasn't he? And to see him be red-pilled, to see him be personally attacked by the leftist media, and it's opened his eyes to how the system works. What will the Democrats have to do to counter this? Because they can go and pay podcasters, they can pay Oprah, but it just doesn't have the same impact.
The reason that you can't imagine a Joe Rogan on the left is because the thing that they want is not the thing that he is actually doing. They believe that they are smarter than everybody else and that therefore they should be able to tell the American people what to think. And then they project their fantasy onto Joe Rogan that he's literally telling people what to think, and they're following him like zombies as he tells them to vote for Donald Trump, when of course the opposite is the case. The reason Joe Rogan is so popular is because he never tells anybody what to think. He listens to this one, he listens to that one, he asks questions, and then he's like, who knows? Make up your own mind, right? That's why he's so popular, because he is a truly independent thinker. And that's why you will never have a Joe Rogan on the left, because, Rita, they are incapable of independent thought, which is why the American people have totally turned on them.
Well, it's becoming like Islamism. As someone who escaped an Islamist country, it's total submission. You either submit to what we think on every issue, or you're on the outer. You start getting attacked, and that's what happened with Rogan. I want to ask you about Special Counsel Jack Smith. He's dropped the January 6th and classified document cases against Donald Trump. We spoke about that yesterday. But we cannot get past the manner in which he weaponized the Department of Justice. He wasn't alone, but let's not forget he tried to bypass lower court rulings. He tried desperately to manipulate the process so the trial could be before the election. Is there going to be any accountability for Jack Smith and others like him?
You know, there are competing impulses here, Rita. On the one hand, Donald Trump has been very clear that he does not intend to persecute his political opposition or to wreak revenge. He's not interested in that. On the other hand, he has said repeatedly they're not coming after me because of me. They're coming after me because they're coming after you, the American people. I'm just standing in the way. And I think it's very important to him to make sure that this can't happen to any other Americans who don't have his resources. And so I think that's the fine line that you're going to see Pam Bondi and others trying to walk here, which is to somehow bring justice back to justice, to somehow de-weaponize the justice system, but not to then re-weaponize it as a revenge tactic. So there were real abuses of the law, which deserve to be, you know, we need accountability there, but I think it's going to be done in a very delicate, balanced way, or I hope so.
Absolutely. But as you said, the key word there was accountability. Those who have abused their power, abused their offices, need to face accountability. Otherwise, there is no reason for this not to happen again. And I think it's just that sense of justice that needs to prevail here. Batia Unga Sargon, always a pleasure.
Thank you so much, Rita. God bless. See you soon.
Joining me now from Israel is documentary filmmaker and commentator Ami Horowitz. Ami, Israel and Hezbollah have now entered into a permanent ceasefire. This is an agreement that was mediated by President Joe Biden. But as the Washington Post reported 2 weeks ago, the ceasefire deal is a result of Donald Trump's election victory. The Washington Post reports that during a visit to Mar-a-Lago, one of Benjamin Netanyahu's senior aides told Donald Trump that Israel's rushing a ceasefire deal in Lebanon as a gift to Trump before travelling to the White House to hold talks with President Biden. What else can you tell me about this ceasefire deal? Is there confidence in Israel that it will hold?
Yeah, there are a lot of people in Israel who are happy this is going to happen. Look, it's always unknown whether or not ceasefires hold or whether they don't. Only time will tell. We're talking about Israel dealing with an implacable enemy who has made it their life's work to destroy the state of Israel. So you're always dealing with a group of people who you can deal with in the short term, but I think solves nothing in the long term when it comes to a ceasefire like this. But for the most part, look, I'm in Israel. This is a new event that happened just toward the end of the night, but people are skeptical, but I think overall are happy about it. Look, this is so interesting. Let's go back to January 1981. And a few hours, actually a few minutes after Ronald Reagan was inaugurated as president, the Iranians let go of all the American hostages because they were frightened about what he would do to them, right? Coming off a Democratic president who they didn't fear at all, right? Does this make sense at all? Does this remind you of anything today? Look, this is not Trump. Trump's first foreign policy win before he's become president. Just early this month, Qatar kicked Hamas out of their country. They didn't do it because they feared Biden. They did it because they feared Trump. We're already seeing Trump's success in the foreign policy sphere. Look, I'm actually now becoming more optimistic about what he can do, let's say, with Ukraine and Russia. I think both sides fear Trump. Both sides realize that they need to make a deal because they're not sure what Trump is going to do. And I think that's a good thing. This lack of clarity on how Trump is going to react has actually served him really well. Look, not to go over all his greatest hits, but I'll remind you of when everybody was attacking Donald Trump for his view on NATO, when he had this quote unquote bluster about defunding NATO. You know what the net result of that was? The net result of that was that 6 out of the 31 NATO countries who before Donald Trump did not hit their 2% threshold target on spending, now 23 out of 31 are in fact hitting that number because they were scared about how Trump might react. All of these things are interconnected, Rita. All of these things are an outgrowth of a Trump presidency that's on the horizon.
Absolutely. It's peace through strength. That's been the philosophy. That is, it might seem erratic and unconventional, but it works. It's worked in the past, and let's hope it works again. And it seems to be working already. Now, talking about Donald Trump's transition team, he's picked Dr. Jay Bhattacharya to lead the NIH. He is the nomination now for Director of the National Institute of Health. This is, Army, I've got to say, a brilliant pick. He is professor at Stanford School of Medicine, and throughout the COVID era, he showed enormous good judgment. He showed enormous courage to challenge some of the boneheaded, anti-scientific and harmful COVID measures we saw, from school closures to mass lockdowns. He was attacked for it, he was defamed for it, but he stood up to that bullying to speak truth to power, and to see him elevated and recognised like this, I think is enormously important. And he will do a great job in the role.
I mean, Rita, you took the words right out of my mouth. There's nothing I really need to add to that. It was a great pick. It was another winning pick for Donald Trump. And certainly it's a pick that the left fears. I don't know exactly why, but they seem to think that anybody who had a counter-prevailing view of COVID was some kind of weird anti-scientific whack job, when in reality, history has proven them right, right? His entire process of saying, look, let's tranche out the people who have COVID by age, by their ability to get particularly sick by COVID. Let's create an immunity, a natural immunity, which is far more durable than these shots, the jabs, as they called it, that they were given, has all proven to be correct. Yet the left is up in arms about this pick. It goes to show how they are not living a reality. Again, going back to why did Trump win this election? For these kind of reasons, because the left is so out of touch with mainstream America, how they view the world, and by the way, how they viewed COVID, looking now back in the past. And by the way, he's also spoken very publicly about the NIH prior to this pick, talking about the need for efficiency in this organization. And by the way, this is a hallmark of all of Trump's picks, the idea that there needs to be government efficiency, government accountability. This is another pick that will do exactly that. I'm thrilled.